Welcome to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast, your guide to future tech trends and innovation in a language you understand. Now, over to your host, Neil Hughes.
Greetings and salutations. I'm back in the UK and normal service has been resumed after a fantastic week in Phoenix. And I really love how they're turning the challenge of emerging technology into an opportunity over there and inviting companies from all over the world to join their tech community. And I'm not going to lie, seeing driverless cars on the road also brought out this childlike wonder inside me. So during my visit, I did learn how Phoenix are creating a more affordable alternative for businesses to Silicon Valley, and also a better standard of life for their workers with 300 days of sunshine a year. Imagine that. And I got to admit, 72 degrees in January is all good by me as I sit here shivering a little bit in the cold UK. But man, it does get hot over there in June. But as one guy said to me, Neil, I will take 3 months of heat over 3 months with a snow shovel. Good point indeed. But what I love most about places such as Phoenix, Denver, Austin and Portland is they're creating thriving economies due to embracing emerging technologies. But wherever you listen to this show, tell me what you think. Tell me if you think I should be shouting more about where you live, because I need you to educate me and open up my eyes, just like the guys at GPEC did last week in Arizona. But enough tales of my travels. I'm now back in the UK and I want to revisit a subject that deserves much, much more attention. And that is how the world of tech has forgotten an entire generation. For example, did you know by 2050, older people will outnumber the young for the very first time? And it also estimated that there will be over 1 billion people over the age of 60 by 2025. So in our ageing global population, the proportion of older citizens is increasing rather than decreasing. But, and here is the big but for me, technology companies are completely ignoring this generation. And anyone that spent time with their grandparents over the holiday season, it struck me at least that this generation is locked out of this brave new tech world. Their kids lead busy lives and they seldom see them, but they don't have access to real-time sharing of statuses, stories, photos and videos. Essentially, they've been shut out. And although we don't talk about this, this leads to loneliness, which leads to much, much worse things. But it's all very well me, just a tech writer and tech podcaster, talking and debating these subjects, but I wanted to find out more from a doctor's point of view on the problem of loneliness and equally how technology can help. So buckle up and hold on tight so I can beam your ears all the way to California so we can speak with Dr. Kerry Burnight from GrandPad. And she's going to tell us all about why loneliness is actually a bigger problem and it's actually a more dangerous problem than obesity and smoking, but also how technology can help. So a massive warm welcome to the show, Kerry. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Certainly. My name is Kerry Burnight. I'm a gerontologist. So that is, I study aging. And for 20 years, I served as a professor in geriatric medicine in a medical school in California. And I had no intent of ever leaving that nice tenured life. Except that I started to see how many of my patients had endured elder financial exploitation, and that financial exploitation went very quickly to physical manifestations of not having the money they needed for paying for care. So I've been looking and looking for a solution, and I started a nonprofit to that end as well. And what I found is that one of the very biggest risk factors is loneliness. And so I was looking and looking for a way that we could connect humans. And UK, where you're from, does such a really good job in doing that. So I wanted to learn from what the UK has done in connecting humans and then bring a California high-tech Silicon Valley solution to it.
And I'm so glad you mentioned the word loneliness there, because I've recently watched a TV appearance with you where you said something that completely blew me away. And you said that loneliness is actually a more dangerous problem in society than obesity and smoking, especially in older adults. I mean, can you just help set the scene and talk about the scale of the problem here?
I would love to, because I too, up until about 10 years ago, didn't know about this. And of course, I don't advocate smoking or obesity, but some very rigorous research showed us that being chronically lonely, as defined by wanting more social connection than you currently have, is the equivalent of smoking 15 cigarettes a day. And although, we found it to be one of the biggest risk factors of elder abuse and neglect, it also had just a staggering connection to cognitive impairment in different forms of dementia. So one study showed us that those who are chronically lonely had a 64% increase in likelihood of cognitive impairment. So it's terrible news, and the scope of the problem is quite staggering, with almost 43% of adults age 65 and older wanting more interaction than they have. But there is very good news, and that is it is really something we can do something about. And so I am delighted across the world that people are starting to recognize its severity and its how common it is, and also to find innovative ways to combat it.
Your words will resonate with people listening all over the world. This is a global problem that we're dealing with here. And just during the holiday season recently, I personally noticed how households have gone from having 4 generations of people under one roof, laughing and enjoying each other's company, to everyone being face down on their smartphone screens. But what I really noticed is that the older adults there can often feel completely locked out of this new digital sharing world. For example, they don't have access to those latest family photos that are being shared every day, and people like you and I will take that for granted. I mean, is that something that you've noticed too? And do you think that in many ways technology has actually forgotten about an entire generation?
Absolutely. So what I would see, with hundreds and hundreds of patients is that every human wants to be connected, and we all enjoy photos and the accessibility to music and to games and to easily call and video call our loved ones. But our society has not designed products to capitalize on this incredible and growing and burgeoning population. So instead, what standard devices have done is they've said, here is tiny font with a hard little something to connect, with tiny little instructions and hard to hear. And now we're going to, quote, train you to use these devices. And so it's kind of a double whammy, because not only do we feel left out as older adults, but when we do try to jump in and be like our kids and grandkids, we're made to feel less than. But the reality is this older population has the greatest source of wisdom and resilience and humanity than any other age group. So the question is how to bring the good of social media and connection and enjoyment to older adults. Wow. And now this is a big caveat, while keeping out the bad. And we all know that there is such predators out there. And this very day, I received an email from, quote, my colleague, and it said that he needed something from me. Could I go and get some gift cards for something? And I thought, well, I'm happy to help, but I wonder what he needs gift cards for. So thank heaven I was able to call him and say, so when do you need these gift cards? And he said, what do you mean by gift cards? So all of us are prey to very organized criminals trying to get after our hard-earned money. And this is particularly true with older adults. And so, how to use technology to connect and then create technology that cannot be hacked and scammed and have all these perpetrators after our money. That was the big question.
I think it's also important to point out that by 2050, older adults will outnumber the young for the very first time. And it's also estimated that there will be over 1 billion people just over the age of 60 by 2025. So in this aging population, the proportion of older citizens is increasing rather than decreasing. But I think this should be an opportunity for businesses to find new ways to make life easier and comfortable as we age by leveraging technology. So can you tell me why you think this is so important to you at GrandPad, and also what you want to achieve with this device?
Yes. So the scope of the opportunity is staggering. And when we think about it's not only is it we've never in the history of society had so many older adults, it's particularly apparent in those that we lovingly call super seniors, those over 75. And so when we talk about it isn't a they kind of thing, it's an us kind of thing. It is we all are likely to live to be 100. And we have this multi-billion-dollar anti-aging smear campaign saying that it's ugly and terrible and awful to get old. But the reality, when you look at the literature, older adults have a higher life satisfaction than those of us in our 30s, 40s, and 50s. So the goal of GrandPad was to basically improve the lives of millions of older adults by reconnecting them with their family, friends, and caregivers. And to do that, what is absolutely critical is listening to older adults. So we had the absolute privilege of employing grand advisors, who were the ages of 84 till 114 was our oldest before her passing. And what we learned was people don't want to bother with what we've called points of frustration. So it should be intuitive. And the ultimate sophistication is simplicity. Not because older adults are in any way less than, it's because as older adults, we're wiser and we don't want to deal with the headaches of poorly designed anything, particularly poorly designed technology. So with the GrandPad, we engineered out, for example, the on and off button. You simply open the cover and it works. And we had to, for example, redesign the screen that you touch because our older adults who are 90 and above, your fingers lose moisture. And what that means is that traditional and standard monitors don't respond to your touch. How frustrating. So we put in the hardware of a sensitive screen so that at any ages, you can just press it and it works just like everyone else does. More frustrations I can point to is passwords. We have been able to eliminate passwords while maintaining a perfectly secure circle of trust so that only the people that the older adult chooses to be, they can reach everyone, but only who they choose. And then I could go on, but for another thing is that the Wi-Fi, we enabled it with LTE so that wherever you go, it simply works. How revolutionary.
Absolutely. What also stands out for me is how GrandPad's aiming to prevent the psychological effects of loneliness and what that can cause. And sadly, some people listening will know that all too well. But for those that don't, can you just maybe go through some of those psychological effects and also how you're hoping to counteract them with our GrandPad?
I would love to. My favorite topic and the topic of my research. So there is kind of an outdated notion that there is some shame associated with loneliness. So when I ask people that I work with, if they're feeling lonely, everyone's first reaction is, no, I'm fine. But in the very same way that we need sleep and we need food and we need to get some exercise, humans need connection. And it is the very nature of going through life's journey that when we aren't working any longer, when we aren't raising children, when we are limited by visual changes, hearing impairment, by mobility issues, or maybe we're not driving now, that it is so common. And it's it isn't a shame, and that's what we're trying to do, kind of as a world, is to try to say it's really common, it's really devastating, and there are ways that we can connect, and it's physiological. So it being lonely increases inflammation, and it also triggers a part of the brain. It's called the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex. And that part of the brain is the same area as what is stimulated when we're in pain. So if you think about a time you were in pain and you felt irritable and you didn't have any energy, and I always think about when I was having our children and before the epidural came, I wanted everyone to get away from me, even though I wanted help. And so with chronic loneliness, this part of the brain is stimulated. So it is physiological, and it is therefore not anything to be ashamed of. And that we could all, like, every one of us is lonely sometimes. You can be lonely in a room full of people. You can be lonely in when you're married. You can also not be lonely and be alone. So I want to kind of conceptually disentangle being with someone, because unfortunately with many of my patients, they are not physically alone, but they still feel lonely. And that's something that we if you recognize it, we can remedy it.
And you did say at the beginning of the interview, you kind of hinted at the importance of music in the lives of older people as well. And before you came on the show today, I did do a little bit of research on you, and I saw a great video of you talking about how music can be an actual lifesaver to older adults. So can you share some of those insights around that, and also why you think it's such an important big feature of GrandPad?
Yes, I love music, and I love its effects on my patients. So music is stored in a part of the brain that is maintained even with cognitive impairment. So if we live long enough, many of us, nearly half of us, will live with cognitive impairment. But what I always say to folks, it is not a death sentence, because who we are is not our physical body, nor is it our brain. We are more than that. And so with music, what I have found is I have a number of patients who are in the final stages of Alzheimer's disease. And yet, if I select emotionally salient music, so this is the biggie, it can't be just any song. It needs to be a song that has meaning to you individually. And I'll give you the example. I work with a beautiful woman who is nonverbal and quite contracted, living in a nursing home. And she was one, when I spoke with her family, who very much enjoyed hymns when she was a young girl in the South. And when we played those particular hymns, her eyes would open up and she could sing the words. And every time, tears are streaming down my face and her daughter's face. And then afterwards, there was a bit of a halo effect so that she could say some words even after the music was off. And this particular woman, she kept repeating the word lovely. She's just over and over, lovely, lovely. And I thought, if I don't do anything else in my life, to have somebody be able to join back into society and say the word lovely and enjoy those musical hymns was a great blessing. And access to music can be a challenge, because on standard devices, you need to go and maybe purchase a song, and that requires a password and your credit card and all of this. So our goal was to give people access to music. And so on the GrandPad, we included 30 million songs that can just be accessed for free and by typing in either the name of the song or the artist, or we can have, if you like a certain genre of music, those songs just play and then you can tap which are your favorite. So I use a GrandPad for my musical listening, and I do it not only, at work and when I'm doing my chores and exercising, but also when I'm, for example, playing games on the GrandPad or looking at photos, I can have that music playing in the background. So I could talk for hours about music, and there is an organization called Alive Inside. And if people, I'm not affiliated with it, but they show videos of people who have these reactions to emotionally salient songs, and it's just beautiful.
It really is a beautiful story. Now, for grandkids, children and parents listening all over the world that have incredibly busy lives, but your words have really resonated with them today. Can you just tell me a bit more about how, with GrandPad, you're actually bringing the older adults back into the family and making it easier for them to connect with everybody within the family?
Yeah, so we want them to be the center of the hub. And so the older adult has the GrandPad that arrives at their house already loaded with photos and their contacts, and if you wanted, their favorite songs. And people think, how does this happen? How does it arrive with no setup? And that's because their loved ones. So, for example, I have a 90-year-old mom and I am 50. And so what I did when I ordered the GrandPad, I go on my computer and I can real easily just add her contacts and the photos I want to be on her GrandPad. And we then, through the wonders of the cloud these days, it just arrives to her with that. And then I send with my standard device, so mine, for example, is an iPhone, I then send out to all her kids and grandkids, and in our case, we have 21, send them out a link. And that then enables them to all download their free app. And then whenever they take a picture, it goes right through the air to grandma's a GrandPad. And she doesn't even have to do anything. It will just scroll through those pictures. Similarly, I can, when I get into work, press a button on my computer or my phone, and I then am video calling my mom. And the video call has been truly life-changing because my mom is hard of hearing. So now she can see my lips move as I'm talking. And if she ever misses a word, we have real-time text. So I can type in saying, no, I didn't say October, I said November. And we can be, and so we get to do lots of laughing back and forth with being able to, for the first time in many years, be able to really enjoy one another despite not living as close to one another as we would hope.
And I've got to ask, do you have any other stories that you can share of how GrandPad has actually transformed the lives of users? Do you have any stories like that? Do you get to hear feedback?
I'm so happy you asked, because usually I regale all my stories to my husband. And so it's nice to have another outlet for my stories. Okay, so where to start? Okay, I will start with, it's been very cold in the Midwest of the U.S. They called it a polar vortex, and I think it got down to negative 40 degrees. And so we have a family who, their dear 87-year-old mother lives alone after her husband passed away, and it wasn't possible for her to get out. And they were quite worried about her in her home. And so this family, they devised a system where each day the kids and grandkids who were spread all over the world were calling and doing video calls. And then one of them was able to stream a wrestling match that the grandson was participating in. And so I was the lucky one to get the call from this wonderful older adult saying, I had so many visitors during the storm. And she said, and not one person had to venture out into the snow. And she said, not only did it make my time hold up okay, she said, I have to say I had a pretty good time. So that family has said, why do we have to wait till an emergency to be doing this? They had such fun. And then all those memories are preserved. So that circle of sharing photos, it doesn't just go to the senior, it goes to the whole, family group that you create. And what's neat about that is that everybody is then making comments on it. And if somebody is a big Instagrammer or a big Facebook person, those feeds can also be just automatically fed into the GrandPad. But a lot of times families, they want to post more things than they would necessarily do on Facebook or Instagram or other platforms. So this way you can, like I have also another family who they every day are sharing pictures of the new puppy. And so you're practically watching it grow up live. And I think that your Facebook friends would start to bore of your puppies, but not our GrandPad groups.
Fantastic. So, I mean, it's amazing work what you're doing, but what's next? Is there anything else that you can share with us today? Or
I'd be happy to. What's next is unlimited. Okay, so Right now, the GrandPad is what I think of it, it's a way into connect with older adults. But once in, it's a platform that always can be, like our company is always expanding it to grow with the needs of humans. So what's exciting, so now, for example, of course, there's phone, email, photos, a camera, articles, weather, music, and games. But it will always be continuing to grow with the services that people want. And so it's not static, and it is therefore, and you never need to replace it. So I grew quite tired of needing to replace my standard phone to get the new fancy version. This way, the content and the opportunities are just pushed down, so you never need to relearn anything. And then my favorite feature is one that will always remain. So I've talked a little bit about being high tech, but what I care so deeply about is remaining high touch. And so by high touch, you can press this red button that says help, and each older adult is assigned to a live member experience representative that the older adult can get help. So what it is, it means that the grandsons are getting out of the IT business, and instead the older adults are empowered and have the dignity and autonomy to get everything if they need themselves. And sometimes people will even, they don't necessarily need any help on their GrandPad, but they want to connect, and they can press that, and a live, loving, specially selected human will be on the line to have a conversation. And that, as a gerontologist, is the way that we are going to stem this epidemic of loneliness that is literally killing us.
So if we have anyone listening that would want to find out more about your research, about your work, and equally about GrandPad, and what is the best way of connecting with you, contact a member of your team, or just finding out more information?
Yes. Okay. So there's a couple ways. One is if you wanted to learn more about GrandPad, you would go to grandpad.net. And if you are not a user of technology, because not all of us are, then there's a phone number that you can call. And again, you'll always get a live patient, terrific person. And that number in the States is toll free 1-888 545-1425. And if people would like to learn more either about GrandPad or other topics in aging brilliantly, as I like to say, you could go to grandpad.net, and there you'll find all kinds of information. And if you look for Dr. Kerry, that's me, and there's additional content and research there as well.
Fantastic. Well, I'll add all those links to the blog post that accompanies this episode. So we'll have GrandPad and your own website there just to make it easy for people. That's what it's all about. But it's amazing work what you're doing here. And it really does feel like technology or tech companies have forgotten about an entire generation. It's just great to see you doing something about that. So a big thank you for coming on and sharing those stories with me today.
Well, thank you very much for what you're doing about getting the word out about ways that we can use technology to empower and create dignity. Because if we don't, it's going to be used to do the opposite, which is, if we've seen it with the young people with their heads down in their phones all the time. So what we need to do is create technology that empowers, creates connection, and is a different and unique path.
Now, before Christmas, the guys at GrandPad kindly sent me a device for my father-in-law, who's in his 80s and never used any kind of technology in his life. And I'll tell you a little secret, his reaction to it was priceless, because it came with a number of safely approved websites preloaded, such as gardening, craft. You get the picture. And he said to me, "Neil, this is great, but I'm not really into gardening and crafts. Can I get the football and racing results on here?" I loved how in his mid-80s he still had a very clear expectation about exactly what he wanted from that device. And thankfully I've added those URLs to the device and he's a very happy man. But what I love about it more than anything is that when we're away on holiday, of course we call him every day, but he could never see the kind of things that we were talking about. But now we can send him photos directly of our travels in real time. And he loves that real-time access to photos or videos. And although it's something that most people listening will all take for granted and like, yeah, I do that all the time, what's the big deal? Once again, this entire generation has been locked out of that world, and that is the game changer for me. And the thing about GrandPad is at least it's aiming to tackle the effects of loneliness in a digital age where an entire generation is disconnected. And as I always say at the end of every episode, technology works best when it brings people together. And GrandPad is reconnecting people with their family. And it doesn't get any better than that, right? But enough for me and my impassioned rants. I want to know more about your family. I mean, do they feel disconnected in a digital age? Do you wish that you could actually share your day with them more too? As always, send over your thoughts about today's episode by emailing me, techblogwriter@outlook.com. You can also get me on Twitter and Instagram, which has the same username, @NeilC.Hughes. I'd really love to hear your thoughts on that. And elsewhere, before I go, after completing another virtual class and helping people launch their own podcast, for those of you that are just tuning in this year, every year around October, November time, I take a group of virtual students and I hold their hands through the process of creating their own podcast. But I do all the editing and splicing those audio files together because very often people just don't want the hassle and they don't have the time to edit their own audio files. So my last class involved taking the students and giving them 8 episodes. So they began January, not with New Year, New Me, and then forgetting about it, they started January with 8 full episodes. Now, the feedback from the students has been overwhelmingly great, but a few did say that me helping them getting through the first 12 episodes and keeping them up and running for 3 months rather than 2 would make them feel a little bit easier. So I have taken these comments on board, and if you sign up to my next virtual class, you can focus on recording 12 conversations and then have me edit and produce your own podcast for 3 months, assuming you want to spend that long with me. Of course, I realise you can have too much of a good thing and you're already listening to me talking directly into your earballs every day. To many of you, I think a little bit more of me would be overkill. So on that note, I'll make my excuses and sneak out the back door now and just say a big warm thank you for listening to this Daily Tech Podcast. And until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thanks for listening to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast. Until next time, remember, technology is best when it brings people together.